Hi, everyone. It's been really amazing to hear from experts on all these esoteric aspects of nature. I come at this topic a little bit more green at the gills. I'm very much that person who will very flippantly say, "Oh, like, I'm not going up a mountain. I'm not wearing wellies. Like, I don't like what for." Like the idea when I was young of walking without the purpose of getting somewhere that you needed to be was just bizarre. I didn't understand it. The idea of going for a walk for its own sake. So I was definitely what I call nature phobic up until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I suppose all the conversations around climate science, climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it, has made me think more about this relation with the earth and lack thereof that a lot of us have. And trying to understand how I can approach that as an artist and as a writer, because my field of expertise, as it were, is storytelling. So I'm really interested in how I can come at that in a way that feels invigorating and exciting and relevant to me, because I feel like the artistic voice, when it comes to nature, has been dominated by this really austere, somber, Ted Hughes-esque white, jowly man. And that's fine. But it does mean that there is this immediate distinction I make between that supposedly authoritative voice when it comes to describing nature or communing with nature, and then someone like me who likes WKD and Netflix. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, well, if I go out into the woods and look at some birds, I don't feel like I have the perspective or the connection that someone else who grew up in an environment like that would have, which is so silly, isn't it? Because I think Beth pointed this out earlier, and it's such a true and profound thing. Nature is one of the very few things we have left that is free, that is neutral, that is ours to just be amongst without having to be anything in particular. And the way we've managed to still commercialize or commodify or like segment that into certain categories is one of the biggest tragedies, I think, about this whole thing. So all of that said, I'm going to do a pretty scattered and loosely connected little chat about my journey with incorporating nature into my work more. And I'm going to start with a poem about octopuses, because why not, eh? That classic part of the English countryside, right? But I'll explain a little bit more about how this connects after I've read the piece. Okay. Octopus. There and there again. Lacerations of limb, angsty and anxious like thoughts missing their anchors. Octopus. Unwitting victim of bad PR. Unwilling star of monster myth and niche Japanese porn. Octopus. You move how a child moves, how a Harlem jazz band jams, how cigarette smoke blooms, how loneliness meanders, nomadic, able to squeeze into the tiniest of spaces. Octopus. Fuck. You're just so cool. Octopus. Proto-punk whip muscle, hench quasi-jellyfish, cautionary tale, misunderstood, solitary, unsung alien emo of the ocean. Octopus. Tentacles lace behind my ankles. I am pulled forward with a soft smack. The ocean licks its salt-rimmed lips. Did I mention I'm not the most confident of swimmers? Did you press your fingers to my neck in search of a pulse or gills? Octopus, you terrify me. Octopus, I see myself in you. Octopus, I'd like to strike up a friendship with you. We'd watch back-to-back episodes of Planet Earth, which is kind of like the aquatic world's Instagram. Pornographic spikes of light rippling the blue into grey, then green and back again. Schools of fish glint like sweet wrappers. Coral reefs wink. Starfish splayed out like acquiescent assholes on a background of gorgeous turquoise. My new pal will turn and look at me as if to say, what a beautiful home I have. I barely recognised it. Octopus. The plural is both octopi and octopuses. The valve of the last syllable spits and hisses, never quite finishes, will not give in to crisp diction. It demands you sit patient with its aftertaste. Octopus. They change colour, less like chameleons, more like mood rings. As they perish, they turn white as a gasp. So, explanation. I had a friend monologue at me about octopuses and how cool they are for about half an hour when we were having a drink at a pub one day. I don't quite know how we got onto it, but I remember being so mesmerized and transfixed by her description of these creatures and the big mystery around their evolutionary makeup and the potential connection between humans and octopuses because of their very complex intelligence and neurological. Anyway, so that was all really interesting. And then this all kind of coincided with me ending up doing a lot more work with theatre companies that are based in rural areas. So there's a theatre company called Knee High in Cornwall who do wonderful, wonderful big productions and are, very popular all over the country, but have their roots in Cornwall. And I've been doing a lot of work with them recently, and I found myself in lots of different parts of Cornwall. And I suddenly got fixated with this idea, this image of an octopus on a beach, just washing up on a beach, and what that felt like as a starting point to a story. I guess the metaphor would be this sense of outsiderness that so many of us people of colour have felt in rural or coastal spaces. So yes, I am the octopus on the beach, I suppose, to some extent. But I've started writing this play, and it's called An Uneventful Day on the Beach, and it follows a mother and a daughter trying very hard to just have a very nondescript, sweet day on a beach, like you would see many white families having, a 99p flake cone, have a little paddle in the water. And this all might sound very innocuous to some of you, but there's something so revolutionary about putting Black people in such mundane spaces and just watching them live that way. So often our narratives are just full of, oppression porn and violence, and this is the reality for lots of Black people in this world, absolutely. But I think there's a really horrible and dehumanizing effect there where this synonymizing with Black and urban to the extent where Black people are trapped in the narrative of drive-bys and, living down and out in a council estate, et cetera, just really, really does a disservice to the nuances of our experiences, the power of our imaginations even, because even if we do live in council flats or we do have lives that are mired by violence, I feel like it's so important to just see oneself in so many different environments and contexts and know that, to put it in quite a hippie way, you exist in many different places at once, even if your material body may not be on a beach in Cornwall, that there is someone who looks just like you who might be. And I feel like as a storyteller, that's a big part of why I do what I do. I think myths are important. The stories we tell ourselves are important. So this play, An Uneventful Day at the Beach, is still in motion. I'm still working on it. But it was definitely inspired by lots of walking that I did on beaches and making peace with being the odd one out, because everybody else was, a cherry-cheeked white person with a very lovely dog and a North Face jacket. And I was wearing new look leggings with a hole in the crotch. And I'm still a little bit nature phobic. I don't really want sand in my shoes, and I don't really want to walk through the bush with the stinging nettles. I'm still a bit precious. I still got that suburban living in me that tries to resist those environments, but just sitting with that discomfort and letting it be and letting myself develop my own relationship with these landscapes that may not be with the dog and the jacket and the picnic basket, but might just be me being awkward in my leggings, playing Little Mix in my headphones, and feeling like that was okay and that I could speak to that in my art. And I think that's why I like to write as playfully as I can and as irreverently as I can. I kind of want to dismantle this very high-minded flowery language that we associate with nature poetry. It's often something I say to kids when I teach workshops. I say, poetry doesn't have to be about daffodils and clouds, because I feel like I have to dismantle that fear, because there is this association with nature poetry and a very stiff, boring, uninspiring form of literature that kids struggle to engage with, when actually perhaps that's an unfair thing for me to offer to children. Maybe it's about the language that we use when we talk about nature. Maybe we need to focus less on whether you know the specific Latin root of this, the word for this species, and just tell me what you think of that creature or that plant. Like, you describe it in your own words, with your own vocabulary. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's a dismantling to do with language as well. Your average nature program is presented, by a very sort of a plummy-voiced white man. And I love David Attenborough. I mean, who doesn't? But, again, it's all about the signalling of that and of, the authoritative voice of nature. And, I think I'd love to watch a nature documentary where someone who kind of talks like me is like, oh, like check this bird out. Like, oh, what's he up to? Oh, okay. Yeah, this fella's approaching this female. Okay, he's making some moves. Like, okay, sick. Just why not? It might sound tokenistic or a little bit gimmicky, but I feel we can afford to play with this stuff. It can all coexist. Lots of different voices inputting to this language and discourse around nature. And I've also got another play that I'm writing on, and that I'm writing at the moment, called Parakeets in Ealing. And it was really interesting to listen to a professional ornithologist talk about birds, because this is also a very new pursuit of mine. Also, can we talk at some point, somebody who knows about birds, I'm sure a lot of you do, about how you look at one and want to look in the book, but if you don't know what it is already, you can't really find it in the book. Do you know what I mean? Stuff like that is what makes it difficult, people. Because you have to already have quite a bit of knowledge to be able to cross-reference that bird in the book, because you can't just go by what it looks like, because you'd be leafing through and then it's gone. And anyway, it's difficult. But anyway, again, this was just another really sharp image that came into my mind. I was in my mother's council flat in Ealing, a very drab grey building. It was a very drab grey day, and I was looking out the window, and I remember just seeing this bright green bird on a tree, and I was like, "What the fuck? Like, what?" It looked like the type of bird that you see on a juice carton, like an umbongo, like juice carton. Do you know what I mean? Like proper bird of I was like, "What the fuck? Like, this is Ealing. Like, have I imagined this?" And yeah, and then like a few of them came over and were like just like congregating in this tree. And I thought I was hallucinating. They just looked so out of place in this really dreary, grey council estate environment. And I said to my mum, like, have you seen these birds before? And she wasn't that interested. She was just like, oh, Vanessa, just off on one again. But I Googled it. I was like, okay, bright green birds, West London, what's going on? And then I found out about this little cohort of ring-necked parakeets that were bred in captivity. And then, well, there's lots of stories as to how they've ended up where they have. But apparently they got bred in captivity and escaped, and then they've assimilated to this environment, even though they originally come from Asia, Africa. I'm going to be schooled on this, I'm sure, but that's like their origins. And yeah, they've managed to make a life for themselves in the West London area. And again, just this incredible, powerful image and metaphor of like things that shouldn't belong somewhere somehow thriving and surviving. And yeah, I'm writing a play about a young girl who just looks at these parakeets and thinks they're magic and builds a communion with them. Because I wanted to demonstrate what it would be to build a relationship with nature if you can't go out into a heritage trust space, or you don't have a car, or you don't have the means to get out to these spaces, which a lot of people don't, sadly. But I feel like even in the most dreary and concrete jungle-esque environments, as was said earlier, it's amazing what really beautiful, striking bits of nature come to you. You know, I wasn't looking for birds in that moment, but that just popping up in that window and just creating such a splash of colour and brightness in my day in that moment was just really magic. So these images just seem to be coming to me more and more as I get involved in these things. And it's been really wonderful to be in these spaces and just work out what it means to me, and not feeling a sense of projection of, okay, well, I need to look the part, or I need to sound the part, or I need to speak a certain way or be a certain way to stake a claim to this environment. And I had a really wonderful conversation with my mother about Uganda, where my family are originally from, and the landscape there, because when I have visited, I've always been in the cities. So even my association with my roots is a very urban one. But Uganda has, the most lush, like it's got like Lake Victoria, it's got these mountains and like a lot of biodiversity. And I asked my mum about it because I thought to myself, well, maybe there is this link and this heritage to nature and the communion of nature in my family that I've not even thought to ask about. And my mum said something quite heartbreaking, really. She talked about how the areas by the lake, with the big hills, they're green and lush. People didn't go there. There was this unspoken understanding that the lake was full of demons and evil spirits, and the only people that hung around there were the bush children and the fishermen who know how to manage these spirits and use them for their own means. And this goes into sort of witchcraft and all these sorts of things there. So my mum said that when she learnt to swim, she learnt in a pool. And that was a thing. And again, this is how we adopt these westernized ideas of appropriateness, or how to do things, because of course Uganda is a former colony of Britain. So this distrust you develop of your own landscape via the teachings of this imperial power. And what's really interesting, as is always the way, expats have come into Uganda and have gone, look at this beautiful landscape and all this lake and the hills, and we're going to build a nice big house over here and we're going to live in it. And then obviously the price to live there is now like ridiculous. Like it's like really sought after. There's lots of Chinese people and British people and American people that live by this area that's always been there but has not really been appreciated, or has actually been actively feared by local people for a long time. But now it's almost been gentrified for the entertainment and the pleasure of other people. And I think it's really interesting, the mythology around that space. And you could argue that there's a real sadness to the fact that people feared that environment, but there's also a real reverence and respect for land and the stories around it, and your connection with it. And it's really interesting how caring about land has been marketed as this really hippie white thing, but I look back at a lot of the things that my family were doing in Uganda when I visited, like living amongst animals, not necessarily, like doting after them like we would our pets, but like having a real respect for them and living amongst them, growing fruit trees and being able to cultivate plants and landscape in a really just like ecological way, but without it being a declaration or a particularly demonstrative thing. It just was and is. And I feel like we have a lot to learn about the ecology of being in a landscape from so-called developing countries. So it's really nice to talk to my mother about my country of origin and actually learn a lot about nature from there, and not think that the authoritative voice of nature is this Western one, this English one. So I've got this mishmash of things going on. There's octopuses and there's parakeets and there's lakes and demons and all sorts. And it's a bit of a mishmash, but I'm having so much fun with it. And I think that's what I want to conclude on, that I'm realizing that nature is a fun pursuit, is a playful pursuit. I think perhaps there's an image problem. I think it can seem very dull and very staid, particularly when you're young. And I don't know, depending on what is being offered to you as what is exciting or interesting, the idea that you would sort of sit in a field and look at a flower or look at a bird seems really bizarre, or at least it did to me as a kid. And I think, again, we can just take on this creative challenge of how we're presenting this to young people and people in general, so that it doesn't feel like this sort of high-minded pursuit. I'm going out into nature because it's good for mental health. I'm going to sniff in the clean air. I'm going to stroke the bark of a tree. Good. Do you know what I mean? It all feels very mannered, and I feel we can afford to loosen it all up a bit and find a way for people to be in nature that just ignites a sense of we're having a bit of a muck about here. We're having a bit of an exchange. Do you know what I mean? We're not in a gallery. This isn't, things aren't on plinths. We don't have to be precious about this. And I think if I could get people to engage with it a bit more like that, that would really be my job done as an artist, I think. So I hope that's been an interesting perspective as someone who doesn't know a lot about these things, but is so hungry to learn and is slowly carving out my own bank of words and phrases and images for this really new and exciting pursuit of mine. So thanks for listening. And look forward to chatting about this more throughout the day. Thank you.